Are you a father that wants to level up and be more? This is the Father Figure Podcast, and I am Jeffrey Waldropper. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, what is the reason for this podcast? Well, in my life, I've gone around and I've always observed men much older than me letting themselves go. And these might be good guys who are in corporate. These might be guys who work with their hands. I mean, my father worked with his hands. And I grew up in a household where I saw my father work really hard. And I saw men around me working really hard, but they'll die at the age of 40, 45, 50, 55. And I always thought to myself, there has to be something that can be done about this. There has to be information and knowledge and a group of men that can speak and get along and just come together and not let this be a case. Now, fast forward, I'll get into my story, but fast forward, I moved across to Europe. I was born in South Africa, moved across to Europe where people traditionally live longer and healthier lives. And it just opened my eyes. This is possible. People, men, can live well into their 80s if they just take care of themselves. Whereas in South Africa, it wasn't the case. And then I drew a correlation that it had to do with the lifestyle and all of the things that we think is normal in South Africa just absolutely was unhealthy and was not conducive to living a lovely, long, fulfilling life. Sorry, my alarm just went off. These things happen. So this is the reason I wanted to start the podcast. Was what you can expect is in the future, I'll be having guests on. We'll be talking. Majority of these podcasts are just going to be solo style, like me, like this right now, just me riffing, telling you about my thoughts, telling you about observations that I've made in my life and what I'm currently seeing among men and fathers. And there's this bridge where guys are living their best life. Like, just because you have a family doesn't mean you are not capable of living your best life. It is easy to do it if you have structure, if you know what you're doing, and have just the smallest amount of knowledge about nutrition. And the biggest thing I see is the identity. Men who decide they are going to live a long life and be healthy and do what needs to be done. Those are the guys that make it. Those are the guys that can seem to juggle a high responsibility work role. Those are the guys that can juggle family. They are the guys who you see seeing their mates once in a while, but they don't just see their mates in any fashion. There's a specific way. Maybe they go play golf on the weekend. Maybe they go mountain biking together. Maybe they go surfing together. They always attach an activity. It's different than just going to the pub and drinking. Maybe they do that too sometimes. But what I noticed is these guys don't do that all of the time. They work hard during the week. They work hard on their fitness. They're conscious of their eating. They work hard to be present and available for their family. And then they socialize here and there when they can fit it out. And overall, they just live fulfilling lives. Like, this is the reason I wanted to start this podcast. We're men who identify as being strong leaders in their community, men who refuse to drift, men who are focused and want to continue finding other men that are just as focused. This is what this podcast is for. And I'll just tell you insights about my life, like I said, key observations, and what men can do to self-improve, essentially. So a bit of background about me. My name is Jeffrey Waldropper. As I said, I was born in South Africa in apartheid time. I was not allowed to be adopted before. So what happened was my mother she gave birth to me around the age of 13, 14 during apartheid. There was a faction where people were fighting, and my mother belonged to a certain group where there was a lot of fighting going on, and essentially my adoptive parents said, why don't you come from the township, that village, and just get away from the fighting and sort of stay with us. And my family that ended up adopting me were white South Africans. I'm not white, clearly. So she came along, and my now adopted mom saw that my biological mom was pregnant, and there was apartheid time, so she couldn't do anything other than support my black mother, who was really young and about to give birth to me. So my mother being so young, she was, I mean, I can only imagine how scary that must have been. She essentially didn't know what to do with me once I was born in a government hospital. And those of you that know about South Africa know about government hospitals. There's cockroaches running around, there's rats running around, it's not a pleasant place. And essentially, long story short, my mother didn't know what to do with me because she was a child herself. And so I stayed unofficially with my adopted white parents who couldn't adopt me because it was before 1996. It was before Mandela came into power. It was during apartheid. So I just would be living unofficially, and they would sort of be under wraps with me. Fast forward, my mother, biological mother, gave me up for adoption once Mandela came into power and apartheid was banished. So I must have been one of the first kids to be adopted under the new laws. And later, my mother died, and I went through schooling, and my adoptive parents put me through schooling. So I had a fantastic childhood. You know, it wasn't anything that was really, really out there. We're very middle class. I'd say now that I'm older and wiser, I'd say maybe lower to mid South African middle class. We could afford to put food on the table, get me new clothes, but we certainly weren't going on holidays every year, let alone once a year. So school holidays, were just sitting at home, playing in the garden, essentially. And when there was a chance to do a small trip, we would, but that was definitely few and far between. So I went through schooling in South Africa. I went to a high school, which was really cool. Lots of stories about that. Then my father died while I was in boarding school at the age of 15. I just turned 16. And it was my penultimate year. It shook me. And then I had to finish my final year of high school fatherless, essentially. He passed away and sort of left us. He did the best he could, but, there wasn't any strong father figure leading the house anymore. So the crack started to show. And this is no knock against my mom. She was grieving and she didn't know what to do over time. And she was a housewife her whole life, essentially, with my dad. And so I knew I had to step up. So what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to study a law degree because, I mean, that's what you do, right? These are things that you do. You think, okay, what's a safe, secure job that gets well paid? And you always hear like law's a socially acceptable job. And what I realized was getting my law degree and getting into a top law firm in the town that I grew up in, Durban, South Africa, if any of you know about that. Not Cape Town. Cape Town's the popular spot, unfortunately. It was not Cape Town, it was Durban. Then what happened was I got into this law firm. I worked my butt off 16, 17 hours, gained so much weight. And I said, this can't be it. My family was still struggling financially. I was struggling financially, even though I was a qualified lawyer. You'd think that I was earning a lot of money, but it's actually not that much. And so I said, I'm going to go overseas. And I came to the UK because I had a British passport from being adopted from my adoptive dad, who was British. And I spent time trying to find a job. In future episodes, I get into all of this, but essentially I spent time trying to find a job, eventually landed a job. And it was a tough time. It was my first time moving out of home, but I did it. I stayed with a friend who also, we went to the same boarding school together. He was also leaving South Africa and we sort of came up together. Then I met my now wife, who stayed close to me, and we found each other on Tinder. For those of you, sometimes Tinder works, and found each other on Tinder and we got together, and she's German. And I basically saw a future with her, and she advised that Germany as a society and social system was better than the UK, is just for family reasons. And we came to Germany a few times to visit her family, and essentially now I'm in Germany and working. And since then, I've become an online coach, still in my corporate role as of shooting this. But I'm also an online coach, and I help fathers transform their physique let their identity come through health and fitness, and just providing them structure and a framework to be the father, the man that leads their family from the front. That's the biggest tagline that I talk about: leading from the front. Lead yourself, lead your family from the front. And so that's how this podcast is born. Now, the problem with today's men, I will briefly talk about it in this podcast. The problem is a lot of guys are drifting, and it's become more and more evident since Corona, from what I can tell. Obviously, before that, I wasn't really in Europe. I moved to Europe in 2017. But what I can tell is guys are comfortable with their 9 to 5 job. They are comfortable with being out of shape, with having big bellies, man boobs bouncing everywhere, are haphazard in their approach to fatherhood. They're barely there for their wives. And I mean, I could go into where potentially wives are failing, but this podcast isn't about that. This is not about bashing women. This is about men taking accountability and doing their part to be a better partner and show up for their family and themselves. And so what I see is a lot of men drifting, and I think it's a shame. It's a right shame, because what they don't think about is moving the needle forward and seeing where they would be in the next 10 to 15 years. I mean, if you are someone who hits the snooze button in the morning, the clock is still going to tick. You're just going to be 10 years older hitting the snooze button. And your competition, other men, are going to be getting the things that you know in your heart as a masculine, red-blooded male that you want as well. And there's no reason why you shouldn't have it. There's no reason why you can't have the body. There's no reason why you can't have the finances. There's no reason why you can't have the love, respect from your family. And there's no reason why you can't be the one to give love, respect back. Energy, it's a big one. Presence, it's a big one. You have to be a physical force in your home. And a lot of guys are weak shells. And we can talk about how society has emasculated men and done all these things to where men don't really have a place anymore in society. But, that would be taking blame away from the man again. And I think that that is a right shame. We need to put accountability onto men. We need to make men men again. Men need to stand up. Men need to say no to things more than they say yes. That includes your mates. That includes hurting people's feelings. Men need to maintain their frame in all scenarios, at home, out in the world. Men need to be physical. Men need to be brutes. Men need to be intellectual. Men also need to know when to be soft and caring with their children and their wife. And so in the future, we'll be going deep into all of this. And I just wanted to essentially speak about who I am, my background. I'm a father to a 14-month-old. I'm a husband. I am a dog dad. I work in corporate. I'm an online fitness coach. And that is it in a nutshell. So until the next episode, please follow along this journey as I become better at podcasting, as I become better at speaking. And I'm sure together we'll have a fun time. And who knows? Who knows what's in store in the future for this podcast? Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.